The Galactic Council had one simple rule that had kept peace for over 10,000 years: warfare was forbidden. Disputes were settled through negotiation, economic sanctions, or at worst, limited blockades. Violence was the mark of primitive species, unworthy of stellar civilization. They had never encountered humans. When Earth's first diplomatic vessel arrived at the Council chambers on Nexus Prime, the aliens saw what they expected: another young species eager to join their enlightened community. The humans spoke of trade, cultural exchange, and mutual prosperity. They signed treaties, established embassies, and, for 3 years, everything proceeded according to ancient protocol. Then, the Zephyrian Empire made a mistake. They assumed humans were like every other species in the galaxy: rational, predictable, and, above all, afraid of losing their comfortable place in civilized society. They were wrong about everything. The Council's emergency session was called after the first Zephyrian battle fleet simply disappeared. No distress signals. No debris fields. Just gone, somewhere in the outer rim where a small human colony had refused to relocate. The Council's investigators found only a message buoy, broadcasting on repeat in perfect galactic standard: "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. The Zephyrian Empire has committed acts of aggression against human civilians. Diplomacy has failed. We are no longer bound by your rules." What the Council didn't understand was that humans had been preparing for war since the day they learned they weren't alone in the universe. While other species saw the galaxy's peace as permanent, humans saw it as temporary. They had studied every member species, mapped their weaknesses, and built weapons the Council's treaties had never thought to ban, because no civilized species would ever create such things. The galaxy was about to learn why humanity had conquered their own world not through diplomacy, but through 10,000 years of unending warfare. And why, when pushed too far, they didn't negotiate. They eliminated the threat. The first sign that something had changed came when Ambassador Elena Vesquez missed her scheduled transmission to the Galactic Council. In 3 years of human membership, she had never been late for a diplomatic communication. The Council's communications array on Nexus Prime buzzed with automated queries, each one receiving the same response: signal not found. High Counselor Thexani, a towering crystalline being from the core worlds, felt the first stirrings of unease as he reviewed the reports. The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding their territory again, pushing against the boundaries established by the Outer Rim Accords. Several minor species had already relocated their colonies to avoid conflict, accepting the Council's mediated compensation packages. It was the way things worked: the strong made their desires known, the weak adapted, and peace was maintained. The humans should have been no different. 3 days earlier, the Zephyrian fleet Admiral Kreshtar had sent a simple message to New Eden, humanity's agricultural colony in the disputed Kepler 442 system. The message was standard diplomatic language, polite but firm: relocate your colony within 30 standard days, or face the consequences of trespassing on Zephyrian sovereign territory. The human response had been equally polite: we respectfully decline your request. New Eden was legally established under Galactic Council protocols and will remain under human control. What happened next shattered 10 millennia of galactic civilization. Fleet Admiral Kreshtar commanded the Zephyrian Empire's 3rd Expeditionary Force, 12 massive dreadnoughts, each one larger than most space stations, accompanied by 47 support vessels. It was overwhelming force by any reasonable measure, enough to convince any rational species to reconsider their position. The Zephyrians had used such displays countless times before. Lesser species saw the fleet arrive, calculated the hopeless odds, and gracefully withdrew. The humans had exactly 3 ships defending New Eden, 2 frigates and a single destroyer. By galactic standards, it wasn't even a fair fight. Kreshtar's first communication to the human vessels was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every species in the sector could witness Zephyrian magnanimity and victory. Human vessels, you are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender now, and your colonists will be permitted to evacuate safely. Refuse, and we will take the colony by force. The reply came from the destroyer's commander, a woman whose voice carried no trace of fear or uncertainty. This is Captain Maria Santos of the TDF Indomitable. You are ordered to withdraw from human space immediately. You have exactly 1 hour to comply. Across the Zephyrian flagship, officers shared looks of amazement. The audacity was almost amusing. A single destroyer, ordering an entire battle fleet to retreat. Kreshtar decided to be merciful. He would destroy only the destroyer, leaving the frigates to flee and carry word of Zephyrian superiority back to Earth. The battle began at 1430 Galactic Standard Time. It ended at 1447. The first indication that something was wrong came when the Zephyrian energy weapons struck the human destroyer. The beams, capable of melting through 3 meters of military-grade armor plating, splashed harmlessly against the human ship's hull. Impossible readings flooded Zephyrian sensors. The human vessel wasn't just shielding against energy weapons, it was absorbing them. Captain Santos' voice crackled across the communication channels, still calm, still professional. "You were warned. Initiating defensive response." What the Zephyrians saw next would haunt the dreams of every survivor. The human destroyer seemed to unfold, armor plates shifting and reconfiguring to reveal weapon systems that defied every principle of civilized warfare. Railguns that fired projectiles at significant fractions of lightspeed. Missile systems that deployed warheads with yield calculations that made the Zephyrians' computers crash trying to process the numbers. And something else, energy weapons that didn't just destroy matter, but converted it directly into expanding plasma. The Zephyrian flagship's shields lasted 37 seconds. The ship itself lasted another 23. Admiral Kreshtar's final transmission was a desperate plea: Council Emergency Protocol 7. This is Admiral Kreshtar of the 3rd Expeditionary Force. The humans have violated all warfare conventions. They are using weapons of planetary annihilation against military targets. Request immediate Council intervention. The message cut off as the flagship's reactor core breached. By 1447, 64,000 Zephyrian military personnel were dead or missing. The entire 3rd Expeditionary Force had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated gas and scattered debris. The human destroyer Indomitable reported minimal damage to its forward shields and requested permission to return to patrol duties. The galaxy's communication networks erupted into chaos. Every major species had monitoring stations in the Kepler 442 system. Every major species had witnessed the impossible: 3 human ships destroying a battle fleet that could have conquered worlds. High Counselor Thexani called an emergency session within hours of receiving the initial reports. The great amphitheater on Nexus Prime filled with representatives from 47 species, their voices creating a cacophony of disbelief, outrage, and fear. The holographic displays showed sensor recordings from a dozen different sources, all confirming the same impossible truth: humanity had weapons that made their current military classifications meaningless. The humans must be brought to account, declared Ambassador Velvar of the Hegemony. They have violated the Omega Protocols. Weapons of mass destruction are banned by every civilized species. Where did they even acquire such technology? Demanded Senator Kix Nal from the consortium. Our intelligence reports indicated standard kinetic and energy weapons only. High Counselor Thexani raised his crystalline arms for silence. When the chamber quieted, he activated the main communication array. "Bring me Ambassador Vasquez. Immediately." The response came not from Ambassador Vasquez, but from Earth's military command. A human male in a dark uniform appeared on the holographic display, his expression grim but determined. Behind him, other humans in similar uniforms worked at control stations displaying tactical information that made several council members unconsciously step backward. "This is General Marcus Webb, Supreme Commander of Terran Defense Forces," the human said. "Ambassador Vasquez is no longer speaking for humanity in matters of galactic security." The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. Every species in galactic history had maintained the separation between diplomatic and military authority. It was fundamental to civilized behavior: diplomats negotiated, warriors followed orders, and never did the two roles merge. High Counselor Thexani's voice resonated with authority accumulated over centuries of leadership. "General Webb, humanity stands accused of violating the Omega Protocols. You have deployed weapons of mass destruction against military targets. This is forbidden by all galactic law." General Webb's expression didn't change. High Counselor, with respect, humanity never agreed to the Omega Protocols. We agreed to participate in the Council's dispute resolution processes. When those processes failed to protect our citizens, we reverted to our own protocols. Your own protocols include planetary annihilation weapons? Our protocols include whatever level of force is necessary to protect human lives and human territory. Webb leaned forward slightly, his eyes hard. The Zephyrian Empire was given every opportunity to withdraw peacefully. They chose violence. They received violence in return. The chamber erupted again, delegates shouting over each other in dozens of languages. Through the chaos, one voice cut clearly: Ambassador Esikatar of the Zephyrian Empire, his scales flushed with rage and grief. You murdered 64,000 souls. An entire battle fleet. How do you justify such slaughter? General Webb's response was delivered in the same calm tone he had maintained throughout. The same way your empire justified threatening to take the colony by force if our civilians didn't abandon their homes. The difference is that we were better at it. High Counselor Thexani activated the chamber's sound-dampening field, bringing blessed silence to the chaos. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of galactic law. General Webb, humanity has 48 standard hours to provide a full accounting of their weapons capabilities and submit to Council oversight of all military activities. Failure to comply will result in immediate economic sanctions and potential military intervention by the combined fleet. For the first time, General Webb smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. High Counselor, you seem to misunderstand our position. Humanity is no longer requesting permission to defend itself. We are informing you that we will defend ourselves, using whatever means we deem appropriate. Economic sanctions are irrelevant, we are now economically self-sufficient. As for military intervention, Webb gestured to someone off-screen. The holographic display shifted, showing a tactical overview of local space. Red markers indicated human military assets. There were thousands of them. Every species in this council has been asking the wrong question, Webb continued. You've been wondering where we got these weapons. The better question is, why did you think we didn't already have them? He paused, letting the implications sink in. Humanity has been preparing for galactic warfare since our first contact with alien intelligence. We studied every species, mapped every strength and weakness, developed countermeasures for every possible threat. We joined the Council not because we needed protection, but because we preferred peace to the alternative. The display showed more data, detailed intelligence files on every major species, complete military assessments, strategic vulnerabilities that most species didn't even know they had. The Zephyrian Empire chose to end that peace. So now you all get to see what humanity does when diplomacy fails. General Webb's image flickered and disappeared, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. High Counselor Thexani stared at the empty display, his crystalline mind processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. For the first time in 10,000 years, a species had openly defied the Galactic Council's authority. Worse, they had the military capability to make that defiance stick. In the depths of space, human warships powered up weapons systems that had been hidden for decades. On Earth, military factories that had been disguised as civilian installations began operating at full capacity. And, in the Outer Rim territories, human colonies started broadcasting a simple message to any ship that approached: this space is defended by the Terran Defense Force. All vessels will identify themselves and state their business or be destroyed without warning. The galaxy's age of peace was over. The age of human warfare had begun. The emergency session of the Combined Fleet Command convened exactly 73 hours after the destruction of the Zephyrian 3rd Expeditionary Force. Representatives from the galaxy's 6 major military powers gathered in the secured chambers beneath Nexus Prime, their faces bearing expressions of grim determination mixed with carefully concealed fear. Admiral Zexkri of the Hegemony Navy activated the holographic tactical display, showing the current disposition of human military assets. The red markers had tripled since General Webb's revelation to the Council. Worse, intelligence reports indicated that many of the new contacts were emanating energy signatures that defied classification. The humans are mobilizing their entire fleet structure, Admiral Zexcree reported, her forearms manipulating the display controls with practiced efficiency. Our best estimates suggest they have been maintaining a standing military force at least 5 times larger than reported. Perhaps 10 times larger. Fleet Commander Torval of the Consortium Defense Corps leaned forward, his cybernetic implants glowing as he processed the data streams. How did our intelligence networks miss this? We had observers on every human world, monitoring every major installation. Because they were hiding in plain sight, replied Admiral Ventok of the Core Worlds Alliance. Look at these energy signatures, their civilian fusion reactors are producing enough power to run military shipyards. Their mining operations in asteroid fields are identical to weapons manufacturing. They've been preparing for total war while we thought they were just building infrastructure. The implications hung heavy in the chamber's recycled atmosphere. Every species present had been guilty of the same mistake. They had judged humanity by the standards of galactic civilization, where military and civilian sectors were strictly separated, where warfare was limited and controlled. They had not considered that a species might deliberately blur those lines as a matter of survival doctrine. Admiral Zexcree manipulated the display to show humanity's territorial claims. The immediate problem is their expansion. Since the Kepler incident, they have established defensive installations in 14 previously neutral systems. They claim these are necessary to protect their trade routes and colonial settlements. 14 systems in 3 days? Fleet Commander Torval's mechanical voice conveyed disbelief. That's impossible. You cannot deploy meaningful military assets that quickly. Admiral Ventok's tentacles writhed with agitation. Unless those assets were already in position and merely revealed themselves. We may have been looking at the tip of the iceberg all along. The tactical display shifted to show detailed scans of the new human installations. What they revealed challenged everything the galactic military understood about fortress construction. The humans weren't just building defensive platforms, they were converting entire asteroids into mobile weapons platforms, creating supply depots that could manufacture ammunition and spare parts autonomously, establishing sensor networks that provided overlapping coverage of vast volumes of space. They're not just preparing for war, Admiral Zexcree realized. They're preparing for a war of attrition against multiple opponents across multiple sectors simultaneously. The chamber fell silent as the assembled commanders absorbed this assessment. Wars in the modern galaxy were brief affairs, overwhelming force applied quickly to achieve specific objectives, followed by negotiated settlements. The idea of prolonged, multi-front warfare was ancient history, a relic of primitive civilizations. Admiral Ventok was the first to speak. We need to test their capabilities directly. Authorize a reconnaissance in force, nothing aggressive, just enough to gauge their actual military strength. Absolutely not, Fleet Commander Torval's response was immediate. The Zephyrians attempted exactly that approach. The result was complete annihilation of their forces. The Zephyrians were fools, Admiral Zexcree interjected. They announced their intentions, gave the humans time to prepare. A proper military probe would be different. What none of them knew was that their secured chambers were not as secure as they believed. Humanity's intelligence services had been watching galactic military communications for years, waiting for exactly this kind of discussion. In a nondescript office complex on Luna, Colonel Sarah Martinez reviewed the intercepted communications with professional satisfaction. The enemy was doing exactly what human military doctrine expected, escalating in predictable stages, testing boundaries, probing for weaknesses. Ma'am, her aide, Lieutenant Chen, approached with a datapad. General Webb wants to know if we should reveal the surveillance capabilities to discourage their reconnaissance plans. Colonel Martinez considered for a moment. No. Let them come. It's time to demonstrate the difference between human intelligence gathering and galactic intelligence gathering. She activated her communication system, establishing a secure link to TDF command. Priority Alpha transmission to all sector commanders, implement Broken Arrow protocols. The enemy is preparing to test our defenses. Show them what we learned from 10,000 years of warfare. Broken Arrow was humanity's doctrine for dealing with superior numbers through technological advantage and tactical innovation. It was named after ancient Earth military terminology, but its principles were universal when facing overwhelming force, changed the rules of engagement. 3 days later, the combined fleet's reconnaissance and force entered the Proxima Centauri system with what they considered appropriate caution. Admiral Zexcree commanded the task force personally, 6 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, and supporting vessels, all equipped with the most advanced sensor systems available to galactic civilization. Their mission was simple: observe human defensive installations, catalog weapons systems, and withdraw before the humans could mount an effective response. It was the kind of operation that had been performed thousands of times throughout galactic history. The human response was immediate and completely unexpected. "Unknown vessels, you have entered Terran space without authorization," came the transmission from what appeared to be empty space. "Identify yourselves immediately or be classified as hostile." Admiral Zexcree frowned at her sensor displays. They showed nothing but cosmic background radiation and the distant glow of Proxima Centauri. Yet the transmission's signal strength suggested a large communications array at close range. "This is Admiral Zexcree of the Combined Fleet, conducting authorized reconnaissance under Galactic Council Resolution 847C. We request safe passage." The response came not as a transmission, but as 37 simultaneous target locks from weapons systems that still didn't register on their sensors. "Admiral Zexcree, Resolution 847C was revoked by the Council 6 hours ago at humanity's request. You are currently trespassing in sovereign Terran space. You have exactly 60 seconds to begin departure procedures." Admiral Zexcree's 4 hands flew across her control surfaces as she attempted to locate the source of the targeting systems. Her sensors showed nothing. The weapons locks were coming from invisible platforms, ships that had achieved some form of technological stealth that rendered them completely undetectable to galactic sensor technology. "All vessels, emergency jump preparation," she ordered her task force. "We're departing immediately." But, as her ships began their jump calculations, more contacts appeared on her screens, not invisible this time, but impossibly fast. Human vessels were dropping out of hyperspace all around her task force, their approach vectors calculated to prevent any escape attempt. The lead human ship opened communications. "Admiral Zexcree, this is Captain Rebecca Thompson of the TDF Nemesis. Your departure window has expired. You will now power down all weapons and prepare to be boarded for questioning. I am an official representative of the Combined Fleet." Admiral Zexcree protested. "This is an act of war." Captain Thompson's voice carried the same calm professionalism that had become humanity's signature in all military communications. "Admiral, your governments declared war on humanity the moment they authorized hostile reconnaissance of our territory. We're simply acknowledging the reality of the situation." What followed was not a battle but a demonstration. Human vessels surrounded the Combined Fleet task force with maneuvers that defied physics as the Galactics understood it. They didn't use overwhelming firepower, instead, they used precision. Surgical strikes that disabled engines without destroying ships, boarding parties that captured critical personnel without casualties, electronic warfare systems that took control of galactic computer networks as if they were children's toys. Within 2 hours, Admiral Zexcree found herself sitting in the conference room of the TDF Nemesis, facing Captain Thompson across a simple metal table. Her task force was intact but completely helpless, their ships under human control, their crews detained but unharmed. "I don't understand," Admiral Zexcree said finally. "Your technology should not be this advanced. We monitored your development for 3 years. You were using standard galactic equivalents." Captain Thompson smiled slightly. "We were showing you what you expected to see. Did you really think a species that conquered its own planet through warfare would reveal its true capabilities to potential enemies?" She activated a holographic display showing the tactical situation. "Every species in this galaxy makes the same mistake. You assume that because we appeared primitive when we first made contact, we remained primitive. You never considered that we might have been deliberately concealing our true development." The display shifted to show human technological capabilities that were decades ahead of galactic standards in every meaningful category. Stealth systems that bent light and sensor waves around ships. propulsion systems that manipulated spacetime itself, weapons that could disassemble matter at the atomic level. "We didn't join galactic civilization to learn from you," Captain Thompson continued. "We joined to study you. To understand your strengths and weaknesses. To prepare for the day when peaceful coexistence might no longer be possible." Admiral Zexcree felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's life support systems. "You were planning this from the beginning. We were planning for every possibility from the beginning. Peace was our preference, but war was always our contingency. The Zephyrians simply forced us to activate that contingency." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't been caught off guard by galactic politics, they had been manipulating galactic politics from the moment they arrived. Every trade agreement, every cultural exchange, every diplomatic protocol had been part of a comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation. Captain Thompson stood, signaling that the conversation was ending. "Admiral, you and your crews will be returned to your governments with a message. Humanity is no longer participating in the Council's dispute resolution processes. Any attempt to enforce Council authority against human interests will be met with appropriate force. Any attack against human territory or citizens will result in the complete destruction of the attacking force and severe retaliation against their home systems." She paused at the door. "I suggest you inform your superiors that they have a choice to make. They can accept the new reality and negotiate with us as equals, or they can continue to treat us as a subordinate species and face the consequences." Admiral Zexcree was returned to her flagship 12 hours later, along with complete documentation of humanity's actual military capabilities and territorial claims. The data packages included detailed analyses of every major species' military weaknesses, economic vulnerabilities, and political instabilities, information that could have been gathered only through decades of careful observation and planning. As her battered task force limped back to Nexus Prime, Admiral Zexcree realized that everything the galactic powers thought they knew about humanity was wrong. They weren't dealing with a young species making desperate gambles for survival. They were dealing with apex predators who had been studying their prey for years before finally deciding to hunt. The Combined Fleet Command would have to make some very difficult decisions, and they would have to make them quickly. Because somewhere in the depths of space, the human war machine was fully awakening, and it had been designed specifically to fight the kind of war that no civilized species wanted to contemplate. The age of galactic peace hadn't just ended, it had been murdered by creatures who understood warfare better than anyone else in the galaxy. The Galactic Council's final session would be remembered as the day 10,000 years of civilization died in 47 minutes. High Counselor Thexani stood before the Great Assembly, his crystalline form reflecting the emergency lighting that had replaced the chamber's usual ceremonial illumination. Around him, representatives from every major species in the galaxy waited with barely concealed panic as the reports continued to arrive. 7 more star systems had gone dark in the past 24 hours. Not destroyed, simply cut off from all galactic communication networks. Human forces had moved into positions around critical trade routes, establishing checkpoints that were politely but firmly stopping all traffic. Most disturbing of all, their intelligence services had somehow acquired classified military documents from every major power, documents that were now being broadcast on public communication channels with detailed analysis of each species' strategic vulnerabilities. "The humans have made their position clear," High Counselor Thexani announced, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. "They no longer recognize Council authority over their military actions. They demand to be treated as equals in all future negotiations, with full sovereignty over their territorial claims and defensive operations." Ambassador Valvar of the Hegemony slammed his armored fist against his podium. "They are holding the galaxy hostage. Their defensive operations have disrupted commerce in 42 systems. They cannot be permitted to dictate terms to superior civilizations." Superior? The voice came not from any ambassador present, but from the chamber's main communication system. The holographic projectors activated, showing General Marcus Webb standing in what appeared to be the command center of a massive military installation. Behind him, dozens of human officers worked at control stations displaying tactical information that made the assembled diplomats step backward in unconscious fear. Star charts showing human military assets throughout the galaxy. Real-time intelligence feeds from major alien worlds. Weapon system status reports that suggested firepower beyond anything previously imagined. General Webb, High Counselor Thexani said, struggling to maintain diplomatic protocol even as his world collapsed around him. This is a closed session of the Galactic Council. Your presence is not authorized. General Webb's expression was perfectly calm, but his eyes held the hardness of someone who had made irreversible decisions. High Counselor, your closed sessions have been open books to human intelligence for 3 years. We know about the military preparations. We know about the economic sanctions. We know about the vote you're planning to take in approximately 17 minutes. The chamber erupted in shocked voices as delegates realized their most secure communications had been compromised. General Webb waited for the chaos to subside before continuing. You're planning to authorize military action against humanity under the Emergency Powers Act. A combined fleet of over 2,000 vessels, drawn from every major power, tasked with forcing human compliance through overwhelming superiority. High Counselor Thexani felt his crystalline structure resonating with stress harmonics. If you know our intentions, then you know you cannot resist such force. Surrender now, and we can negotiate terms that preserve your species' existence. General Webb smiled. It was the expression of someone who held all the cards and was about to play them. High Counselor, you still don't understand what you're dealing with. You see a young species with advanced technology, and you think the solution is to apply more pressure. You've never encountered a species that views warfare as their natural state, diplomacy as their temporary condition. The tactical displays behind him shifted, showing new information that made several ambassadors cry out in dismay. Human military assets weren't just positioned defensively around their territory, they were positioned offensively around every major alien world. Stealth fleets hanging in the shadow of homeworld defense grids. Infiltration teams already on the surfaces of key industrial planets. Weapon systems pre-positioned in asteroid belts and dead systems throughout the galaxy. While you were planning to send 2,000 ships against our territory, General Webb continued, we were planning to send 50,000 against yours. While you were calculating how to force our surrender, we were calculating how to eliminate every major military installation in the galaxy simultaneously. Admiral Zexcree, attending the session via emergency communication link, felt her 4 hearts stop beating for a moment. You're talking about total warfare. Planetary bombardment. Genocide. No, General Webb replied. We're talking about victory. There's a difference, though most species never learn it before they become extinct. He gestured to someone off-screen, and the displays changed again. This time they showed detailed battle plans, not for defense, but for conquest. Every major species homeworld, every critical industrial facility, every military stronghold, all marked for simultaneous assault. Operation Broken Chain will commence in 6 hours, Webb announced. Human forces will seize control of every major military facility, space dock, and industrial center in the galaxy. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. Surrender will be accepted and honored according to the laws of war as we understand them. The silence in the chamber was absolute. 47 species, representing trillions of sentient beings, faced the reality that they had been outmaneuvered by creatures they had dismissed as primitive newcomers. High Counselor Thexani found his voice first. You cannot hold the entire galaxy. Your forces, however advanced, cannot occupy every system simultaneously. We don't need to occupy every system, Webb replied. We only need to control the ones that matter. Shipbuilding facilities. Fuel production centers. Communication networks. Food distribution hubs. Cut those, and your civilizations collapse without us firing another shot. The truth was worse than conquest, it was systematic dismantlement of everything that made galactic civilization possible. The humans weren't planning to rule the galaxy, they were planning to break it down into manageable pieces and rebuild it according to their own specifications. Ambassador Kixnal of the consortium rose on unsteady legs. What are your terms? General Webb's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained implacable. Dissolution of the Galactic Council as a governing body. Establishment of the Terran hegemony as the primary authority for interstellar law and military affairs. Mandatory technology sharing agreements to bring all species up to minimum defensive standards. Restructuring of all trade agreements to ensure equitable resource distribution. He paused, letting the implications sink in. And immediate establishment of joint military commands to prepare for external threats. External threats? High Counselor Thexani asked. Did you really think we were the only species in the universe studying galactic civilization? Our deep space monitoring networks have detected at least 3 other major powers beyond the galactic rim, all more advanced than current galactic standards. They've been watching and waiting, just as we were. The revelation hit like a physical blow. The galaxy's civilizations had been so focused on their internal politics and peaceful coexistence that they had never seriously considered threats from outside their sphere of influence. You can choose to face those threats as independent species with incompatible military doctrines and conflicting interests, Webb continued, or you can choose to face them as part of a unified command structure led by the only species in this galaxy that understands warfare at the level those threats represent. Ambassador Esikatar of the Zephyrian Empire, his scales still showing the stress patterns of recent grief, spoke with barely controlled rage. You destroyed our fleet. Murdered our people. And now you offer to protect us? General Webb's response was delivered without emotion. We demonstrated the consequences of threatening human civilians. That demonstration saved lives, yours and ours. A prolonged war between our species would have ended with the complete destruction of the Zephyrian Empire. Instead, you lost one fleet and gained the knowledge that humanity will respond to aggression with overwhelming force. He turned his attention back to the assembly as a whole. You have exactly 4 hours to make your decision. Accept the new order, and the transition will be peaceful. Your existing governments will remain in place, your civilians will be unharmed, and your cultures will be preserved. Refuse, and Operation Broken Chain will commence on schedule. And if we fight? Ambassador Velvar demanded. Then you will lose, Webb replied simply. And the transition will be considerably more difficult for everyone involved. The holographic display flickered and went dark, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. 4 hours to abandon 10,000 years of galactic civilization. 4 hours to choose between submission and annihilation. High Counselor Thexani called for a recess, but every delegate knew the outcome was already determined. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that made resistance futile. More than that, they had demonstrated strategic thinking that was decades ahead of galactic norms. The final vote was 39-8 in favor of accepting human terms. The 8 holdouts were species whose military commanders had convinced them that honor was more important than survival. Within 48 hours, those 8 species had new governments, installed after their military forces had been systematically dismantled by human rapid response teams. The transitions were swift, precise, and, surprisingly bloodless. The humans seemed to prefer capturing enemy personnel rather than destroying them. 6 months later, the first joint training exercises began between human forces and the reformed galactic militaries. The aliens quickly learned that humanity had been right about one thing: there were indeed external threats gathering beyond the galactic rim, and they required a unified response that only total military integration could provide. The age of galactic peace was over, but what replaced it was something stronger: the age of galactic unity under human leadership. It wasn't the future any species had wanted, but it was the future that would ensure their survival. And, in the depths of space, human deep space monitoring stations continued their eternal watch, scanning for threats that might challenge the new order. Because humanity understood something that no other species had grasped: peace was not the absence of warfare, but the victory of those strong enough to enforce it. The galaxy had learned that lesson at the point of human weapons. Now they would teach it to whatever came next.